maybe someone pays you to do your project. And
wait, you can get paid money for poetry?
Oh my God. A little bit, yeah.
Hello and welcome to the Process Podcast. This is the podcast where we can talk about whatever we want because it's my podcast and not yours. And no, that's not going to be the ongoing intro. It's just I haven't come up with one for now, so I had to borrow one from people. But I am your host, Tyrone Lewis, and for today's podcast episode, I am joined with the ever so wonderful Demi. Hello, Demi.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm very well. I survived the rain, so all good.
We are in that wonderful space in London where A, we're going to talk about the weather because that's what we do, but also B, that thing of, it's summer, it's great, there's barbecues and all that stuff planning, and no, there's torrential rain as well because we can't decide. But as I like to start these podcasts, this is going to be an actual interesting challenge for me now. Like, I tried to give myself at the start of these podcasts, how did I meet my guest and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm now trying to remember how I actually properly met you.
I know.
So, because I feel like I knew of you before I properly met you, I feel. Like, I feel it must have been something fringe related when I first was around you. I think like an anti-slam or something like that kind of thing. I know that my first major interaction with you, I think, was weirdly from Poets React.
Yes.
And doing that series via Zoom. And then the first time I properly remember, not first time clearly, but like in person, like we're just going to hang out, was when we went to go see a drag show together.
That's right. And one of the worst hangovers I had in a very long time followed that night.
I am proud of that. Yes. I will take pride in that one.
It was quite brutal. I think it was like within my first few days of arriving in London, actually.
Perfect. Tyrone's like, cool, come watch drag show and then just get drunk as shit as you first
many pints, yeah.
That's how I will. Yeah. Yes. And what was our first meeting then in your mind? Then what was the first time?
It was the anti-slam, and you were not the judge, but you were the scorekeeper.
Oh God.
Yeah, and I was performing, and I remember we met afterwards, but I remember a really funny moment when, what's the name of the wrestler guy who always was involved in the one that
Colt Cabana.
Yeah,
yes.
So he was one of the judges, and I did my piece, and the whole thing with an anti-slam, as you know, is like you try to get the worst score as opposed to the best score out of 10. You try to go, if you get like 1, you're like, yes, I did it. And I put quite a lot of work into this piece. Like, it rhymed, it was about Bake Off, I threw my passports to the ground, it was political, it was about Brexit. And I had a shirt made, and I like unzipped my hoodie to reveal this shirt of me and the Bake Off judges and like the European Union flag. Anyway, I thought it was quite good. And by good, I mean bad. And then Colt Cabana gave me like a 6 or a 7 or something, which is a bad score in an anti-slam. I just remember you like going to write and you kind of were like you kind of looked at him like, you know, which was very nice of you. And I think you also were able to give like or take away bonus points. Yes. And I think you like took away some points as a bonus because I think you felt for me in that moment.
So for listeners who aren't aware of it, the anti-slam is a slam where the worst poet wins. But obviously it's all satirical, all tongue-in-cheek, all that stuff.
Yeah, like making fun of the kind of tropes of poetry and spoken word a lot. Yeah.
And with that, they have a scorekeeper who basically will properly keep note of the scores, but also is there to kind of balance out the judges and the
make
audience.
It a bit more fair. Yeah.
So like it will be that thing of if the judges don't seem to react to the poem, but the audience are like, no, that poem was bad, or whatever. the scorekeeper can be the person of like, I can play the game and like
take some points away for blah, blah, blah,
I think there was a whole running vibe or thing where they said they got the slam from Germany and therefore they had to get a German scorekeeper each time. It was never a German scorekeeper. They were always playing funny. It. But that thing of like, well, in this actual ancient bylaw in the anti-slam subsection 35, actually, if you mention Bake Off, that actually docks you a couple of points and just doing stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly, which was great. And I really appreciated that because we didn't really know each other. And I was like, what does this wrestler guy have against my poem? Like, I worked so hard on it. But anyway, that was very funny. And then, I think we met after that night. And so nice, actually. Like, I think I probably met PJ that night as well, or like somewhere around that weekend. And it's just so strange thinking I was just at Fringe, as people do, for like a weekend for a couple of days, but I wasn't living in the UK yet. And then like left and, you know, you did Poets React over the pandemic time. But coming back, like coming to London, I kind of knew all these people from those sort of weird random meetings. So, yeah.
That must have been the year that I think, because I've done Fringe a few times, but I think that must have been the year when me and PJ did Boomerang together, when it was just the two of us doing it.
Oh, cool.
There, which was that was an intense week of us just like trying to do a poetry, especially because we weren't anywhere close to actual Fringe Central.
Did you do it every day?
No, we only did it for like a long week there. I think maybe 9 days max.
But that's a lot. Like that's.
I mean, the year before, Jake and Joel agreed to do the whole one of Fringe as an open mic there.
Okay.
And I just came down for the last week.
Yeah.
So I was fine.
That's intense,
they were less fine.
Yeah.
But before we go into instead of going into a full-on Fringe chat, we're talking about you for now. That'll be another. There'll be other episodes we can do about Fringe chat.
Set episode.
But in today's episode, we're going to start off with talking about you and doing my fun section, which will have a graphic and everything as we go into timelines.
Amazing.
With timelines, I like to go over people's past, present, and futures in their creative journey and life and all of that style of things. So I guess the question for you now is, for your past, how did you get into writing and performing? Like, was it always a thing you wanted to do or a thing you fell into? Like, what was your past?
I've done it for ages and ages, like since I was a very small child. And I remember really vividly writing my first acrostic poem.
Wait, so you
started
with acrostic?
Oh, yes, I did. Watch out, Simon Armitage. I'm coming for your turf. But mine was about a sunset, not about the dead queen. And and I did that as like a school assignment, and I got so into it. I remember that being like 5 or something. And then I used to write a lot of books and like illustrate a lot of books and make sure that, you know, all of the tiger family in the book had all of the same stripes and all of the same places on all of the pages. So I was like a very normal kid, obviously. And yeah, I just loved it. And thankfully, like my dad is a really good writer. My mom is like, I think was always really into reading and writing like as a kid, and she's really into art. So she was always super encouraging to me to be interested in art and would take me to lots of museums and stuff like that. So that was just like, luckily, like a really normal part of my upbringing. And I just gravitated towards it, and I started doing a workshop like at a community center basically when I was 12, 13, and it was me and a lot of old ladies basically, like retired ladies in their 60s and 70s. And I loved it, and they were all very nice, and they really like took care of me and encouraged me to keep writing. And I think they found me quite funny and precocious and all that good stuff. And and then I had a mentor when I was in high school, who was also an older poet. She was, I think, already in her early 80s, Patricia D'Alessandro. And we were like best pals. And she helped me write my first pamphlet, which I made like Xeroxed pages and like staple binding, and did my early like Rupee Car before Rupee Car drawings. And I did some little like readings at school and stuff. And I started going to some local poetry events with her, but it wasn't really until 2010, I guess, I graduated high school and went to UC Santa Barbara to start my undergraduate degree. And in the first week, the speaker, like the main speaker at our introduction for freshmen, was Kip Fulbeck, who's a very like well-regarded poet and visual artist based in the US, based in California, and teacher as well. And I couldn't even see him from the stage, so I actually for a long time wasn't sure what Kip looked like, but he basically, I heard his poetry and I was like, oh, I'd seen videos. There's like a really famous video of Anis Mojgani from the Slam in Seattle, like around that time. And that was my introduction to spoken word when I was a teenager. So I was like, oh, there's someone doing that here. And it turned out he taught this class, which was one of the first classes of its kind in a United States college. And technically you weren't supposed to sign up until you were in your junior year. I think we have some rules like that, you know, but I was in a special part of the school where we were allowed as freshmen to sign up for whatever classes we wanted to and like give it a go. And yeah, I signed up. I really loved it. I became his teaching assistant. So I taught also with him like throughout my college time and also after I graduated. And we put on loads of shows in Santa Barbara at quite a professional level for kids who were like 20, 21, 22. And that was my way in. And then I stopped doing it for a long time, moved to Berlin, I did other stuff.
I feel like a lot of poets have that, will have a phase in their poetry getting,
Yeah.
and then I stopped for a bit because other things happened in life.
Yeah, I stopped for years because I didn't really know of, like, the scene in the US is so different than in England, and I just didn't really know that there was a future for it. I guess maybe in LA there are definitely events and there's some popular slams and stuff, but I was like, I don't know, I didn't live in LA, I wasn't really planning to live there, so I focused on other things, moved abroad, and it took, I think it was like, I was already in Berlin for 2 or 3 years before I went to an actual poetry gig, and then discovered actually there's loads of poetry in Berlin and loads of stuff in English as well, which was my other like, oh, I don't know if there'll be something in English language, but there's tons. And around that time I started to apply to things in the UK and come over to the UK and to Ireland a lot. And, you know, time went on and I moved here, and yeah, that's kind of how I ended up here.
Well, if we're going into the move here, I guess it moves us nicely into the present. So what is...
This is the present.
There you go. What is the present, and what is your...
I am joy.
What are you
I am
doing?
abundance. I am wealth.
You're going to start whole
There's
mantras to
only
each
now.
other.
There's only the now.
We're living in the now. This whole podcast is all about the now. I'm going to release
That's right.
This is going to be a live podcast. Screw
Oh my
release
God.
schedule.
Hello,
this is going to be live. Hello, world. This is what we're doing now.
Yeah.
Now,
So
yeah, what is your now and your present
my
in terms
present
of poetry?
is, well, okay, so I skipped over something, which is I did my master's when I came to London in acting, which is important because now I have an acting agent and I do lots of auditioning for acting stuff. I came out with a book last year and I toured the hell out of this book. So I'm a little bit like, I had quite a full-on year between the master's and the book in 2022. So this year has been a lot more calm, and I'm doing some gigs. I've done a bit here and there, but way less. Like I've really taken a step back from doing live performance because I just felt a bit burned out, to be honest, by the end of last year. And I wanted to focus more on other types of writing projects as well, other types of art projects, interdisciplinary work. Most of my time this year has been spent, honestly, resting, creating a schedule for myself that makes my life manageable with, I suspect, undiagnosed ADHD, and like finding healthy routines, healthier habits, which has been great. Actually, it's been really positive year, and applying for just like shit tons of funding, basically, and awards and things, like everything feasible that I could apply to, I've been applying to. So I'm waiting also to hear. I will get them though. I'm going to be the winner.
Are we now
positive.
Are we manifesting as well
yes,
now?
Yes.
I call this podcast because to start manifesting now. We're going to manifest. This is a great podcast to manifest good things for Demi.
It's a great podcast. It's going to be it is number one, Tyrone. This podcast is number one. We are number one. Yeah, the grants are happening. Yes.
Well, I guess I think it is always that thing, like when a lot of people start off having their fun side of it, and like you're going into what seems like, and as you kind of move into the future, and like where the future is, it looks like going into the more, for lack of a better phrase, professional side of this, and looking at the career side of this, and like which will be funding applications and properly working on your craft to like.
Yeah.
With that, where is your future in poetry? Is it more books? Is it more performances? Is it? Are there like, oh, I want to actually still do some teaching and tick that off? Like, what is the future for poetry for you?
Oh, I honestly don't know what the future is, which is quite an interesting place to be in. But I think you're right about categorizing this as like a professional period or a step up in my work, because I've realized after the book came out that there's this shift that happens where you're not only writing and performing because you enjoy doing it and because you can and whatever, but because maybe someone pays you to do your project. And
wait, you can get paid money for poetry?
Oh my God. A little bit, yeah. Not much, but yes, some small amounts here and there, a tuppence. Yeah, so basically, I think this year has been a lot about trying to figure out how do I actually earn money from the work that I'm doing and these skills that I've developed over quite a long period of time. And I work freelance, and yeah, so it's important. Like, it is really important to actually plan and be strategic, which is cool. Like, I've learned a lot, and I'm glad to sort of enter into this new different phase of working, but also can be quite frustrating because you can end up feeling like you're waiting all the time to begin something instead of actually just making the work, which is what you do when you're starting out and you're like, there's no stakes. I'm just doing it because it's fun and I'm learning. So now I feel like the stakes are a little bit different, and I am trying to plan a bit more, like what project makes sense to focus on now. But with that being said, I think now I'm coming full circle to like, fuck it, I can't wait for like funding or for people to give me the go ahead. I need to also just like do the work that I want to do, which leads to I have a few different projects on the go. I think I'm going to be developing some more work in the photography area and visual art area, maybe making some books that are a bit combined, like text, collage, photography, maybe some exhibitions around that as well. I'd quite like to go and do an artist residency at the end of the year, which I'm really hoping will happen. I think it will happen even if I don't get funding. I will pay to do it with a photo collective that's based in Sicily. And we want to work on some books together, so that's quite exciting. Also a bit like teaching and community kind of work there. And aside from that, I have an idea for a TV series, which has been kind of a long-standing project that I've wanted to work on. So developing that is on my mind. And the last big thing I would say is to work on a new book, but that's more prose and kind of memoir writing with a bit of poetry, of course, weaved in. But this concept has to do with my experience traveling a lot and traveling as a solo woman, combined with, yeah, this age that I'm at, which is my early 30s, and this question about motherhood, essentially, and like, is this going to be my future? Is it not? Do I feel okay with that? Am I at peace with it? Should I try, to change sort of my reality now? All of these kinds of questions, and like uncertainty also about what kind of future world will we have even, which is quite tough. But essentially, like, I'd really like to write about this in a longer form, in the form of a book. And I've been starting by doing a little bit of travel writing and some essays. So hopefully this will develop soon.
Going into almost like preview or spoilers of our next section then, but like in your future planning of things, given that you have the acting background, has there been much thought into doing like a one-person show or like theatre and spoken word together, or was it much more for you, at least, your spoken word is here is a small section of it here, rather than trying to combine the two things that way?
I've definitely had loads of ideas for one-person shows, as I think everybody does who like is remotely in this world. You're like, have some interaction with someone, you're like, could that be my show? You think of like a pithy title, you're like, that could be my fringe hour.
Part of me is like, after every single breakup, it's like, is this relationship serious enough to be its own one-person show?
Oh yeah, I went through that last year. Oh my God, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. It's gonna be about this breakup. Yeah, and I've done a bit, like I've been trying to do a bit of playwriting as well, but nothing. I think it's just not. It's not on the forefront of my mind at the moment. It doesn't mean that I wouldn't like to do it, but yeah, I really love going to theater, and I love watching solo shows, and I love watching people who do a combination of like spoken word and acting and other things. But I haven't quite had this brainwave yet of like, this is the thing, and like it feels really important to do it. So yeah.
No, perfectly fine. Well, that is a nice preview as we go on to our next section called Let's Talk About, where we'll talk about a subject and see where we go from there. we are now going to do, let's talk about, where we are going to pick a subject and start talking about that. But I make no promises that we're going to stay on that subject. We're talking. This is how conversations work.
Exactly.
But as we kind of previewed in that last section part, the thing you heard 2 minutes ago, you have an acting background and obviously you do a lot of performance and poetry and spoken word performances. As a general overview to start this off, then how would you sum up your performance style when it comes to spoken word? And then if you have one, how would you sum up your performance style when it comes to acting and that side of things?
Yes. Okay. So I only started acting pretty recently, and I got into my program slightly on the basis that I had experience as a performer, and lots of us in the program came from different backgrounds, so we weren't all trained as actors up until that point, which is, I think, quite unique to the program. There were some dancers, some people had done acting, other poets, it was quite like a mixture. So I didn't really know about like proper acting until quite recently, and I felt like, well, it's quite overwhelming. It's a lot to learn. So the work that I do as a poet now has been informed by that, but also developed for a long time, of course, before it. And I would say now, first of all, the kind of work that I do is a lot, like, you could call it kind of storytelling, quite long form pieces, often based in real experiences, and sort of like they could be almost monologues, I would say. I tend to write a little bit more in that style versus, like, let's say a typical kind of poem with like slam sort of beats, or like this kind of tonality that we know from slams. But I've written some slam poems as well, and I know how to do the self-righteous sort of like upset political thing as well. And I think the greatest thing, like after doing my master's, my poetry, I think you can really see a difference. Like, I'm much more in my body when I perform now. I'm much more physical. I might not necessarily be doing anything super wild on the stage, but I feel more present and I have a different kind of energy, I think, than I did before. I'm much more strong physical awareness, body awareness, in the way that, like, when you watch a actor perform, someone who's really capable and talented and knows what they're doing, you can see their energy in like every, the tips of their hair to their toes to their fingers. Like, every part of them is really alive and they're really aware of those parts of themselves in a way that I didn't have before. So I think, not that I'm, an expert, but it's definitely helped with this a lot. And in terms of the acting style, I'm not sure. I mean, I think that my strengths, they're obviously like kind of the same between both of those things. So I think my voice is a big strength of mine. I tend to have a sort of quite, how can I put it? The director of our program told me quite early on that my energy is like this and it needs to be more erratic. As a performer, and I think as an actor completely makes sense, because you want to keep surprising people and yourself, but there can be something nice about this sort of energy, which is a more like calm, chill sort of thing, and with like some voice acting that can be quite useful, like narration, storytelling, that people feel comfortable listening to you or like with you, guiding them through a story. But I am trying also always to be a little bit more like, like, who knows what's going to happen. And it's really nice, like, having those parts of yourself unlocked, because I think I was quite like afraid to go there before.
Like, now when you're going to Perchment, like, speaking at least for myself, as someone who spent time studying media, there's always that balance between trying to consume media without analyzing it and being very critical of, like,
it's really
bad
hard.
edit there, bad or camera work. They're all appreciating, that's very good camera work there.
Great
and
zoom.
all that, exactly. And all of that kind of stuff. So like, when you're watching spoken word shows and poetry nights, are you kind of, whether intentionally or not, looking at like, ooh, interesting performance style, and like...
Yeah, of course. I think especially if you are more like a performance poet rather than a page poet, you're aware of those things because it's stuff that you've worked on yourself, presumably, you know, especially if you've been doing it for a long time and you've seen loads of people because you just by virtue of the job, like going to lots of events. So, and because I have this background in teaching, we were quite like, yeah, Kip was pretty direct with us about being aware of the things that we're doing naturally, amping some of those things up, reeling some of them back, using things about yourself, you know, like, but you have to be aware of it first to be able to use it. And that it's really connected with acting as well, actually, because a lot of getting cast in something, it's like, how does the world perceive you? There might be things about yourself that you're not really willing to recognize or you don't really want to be seen that way. But the reality is when people look at you, they see whatever XYZ, and you have to also own it and like use it, rather than fighting against it or trying to like hide those things. I think is quite important. So yeah, I think good performers in any capacity probably have a lot of self-awareness in that way, and therefore awareness of others as well. And I love watching people and being like, oh wow, that's interesting. Like, why did they choose to do it like that, you know? And then of course you get to meet people after the show and you're like, oh, okay. Like you understand how much is like artifice on stage, how much is natural, how much seems really natural and off the cuff, but actually is not at all and is really planned, which is fine as well. Like that's putting on a show, you know?
I as is in my book as well, I've got a few poems that I've got aside to the audience that I've gone to the stage with. The first time I did it, it was a bit more natural.
Yeah.
But now it's been so many years doing it. It's like, insert aside here.
It's just like in you, yeah.
To the point that is now just part of the poem now.
Course,
that this poem has an aside after this line that is a line of the poem. It just...
But I know like your pieces that do that and it works still though. That's the thing is like how much do people love that when you reference something that happened like that day or like locally or whatever or like in that room that moment. It works, you know. So yeah, so those are all like tricks of the trade which I think are great to incorporate.
I was at I don't know when I'm putting this out, so there's no point putting times and dates on this, but I was at an event the other day.
Sure.
And I remember it was an open mic night in Peckham called Shits and Scribbles. Love it, love the people that run it. It was a fun night and the first time I'd been there. And one of the open micers, after seeing me perform, had mentioned that like when I walked into the room, partly because, and I know for me, partly because I'd just come from work, but just in general, it was like, I have no idea who this person is. He's just here on his own, not really minding anyone, like minding his own business very much, just in his small little bubble and whatever. And it's like, I just came off a little bit awkward then. Then they saw me get on the stage and was like, the fuck was that? Like, what the hell happened there? Like, it was
like you turning it on, basically. Yeah.
And like, I guess then for you, like, how different the point, that wasn't a big tyrant up thing, but a level of for you, like, how different would you say, I know you touched on it a little bit, but like, is your on-stage persona versus your off-stage persona? And like, how would you describe the on-stage persona, especially knowing that I know you've got at least one of your poems that you've got California Demi that comes out.
Yes, Demi California, yeah. I think that's probably the best example I can give because that piece, when I wrote it from a place of feeling quite insecure, and it was trying to write a character that I could do that is like me in a sense, but some heightened aspect of me who's slightly like crazy and bitchy and like weird and quite annoying actually, but wanting to be able to access the kind of confidence that she has, that this character has. And I wrote it 5 years ago. And when I first wrote it, I also thought that I wouldn't ever perform it because I found it so awkward. Like the piece was so over the top that I was like, I don't know if anyone will get it or find it funny. Thankfully, they did find it funny and I kept performing it. And now, well, a couple of years ago, I performed it and a guy that I was dating, like newly dating, came and saw me perform for the first time. And he was like, Demi, that's not really a character. Like, that's you. Like, that's what you like. Good. And I was like,
comforting.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I think, like, I've changed a lot. Especially, I have so much more confidence now after doing the acting stuff. And it's really interesting because I think I used to have quite a... Well, we were talking about Taylor Swift earlier off the podcast. But, you know, Taylor Swift, one of my best friends, like my oldest friend in the world, told me to watch her documentary when it came out years ago, and I'm not a huge Swiftie, but I was like, okay. She was like, she's like you will relate to it so much. And I really did, because she has, I think it's like this underdog thing that you learn to like promote about yourself. And it's funny because at some point you're not an underdog anymore. Like you can become successful off the back of that, off of people relating to like your heartbreak and like, oh, this girl, like she's so sad and I feel bad for her because I'm also a sad girl, and like whatever, you know. Or like I've had so much heartbreak and like quite hard things throughout my life, like especially when I started doing poetry, I was much closer to like my life as a child and teenager. I had a quite difficult family background. And I'm more removed from it now. I'm also like, yeah, I'm a grown up and I feel much better about my life in general. So you can't like use those cards in a sense anymore. So I feel like I'm really learning now, like, who am I on stage now that I'm not this kind of awkward girl that used to perform with her eyes closed and her bangs like shaking because she was shaking on stage, you know? So anyway, I don't know. I mean, I think still when I meet people outside of a poetry context and they don't know that I perform or they haven't seen me perform, I'm always really interested, like, for them to come to a show at some point, because it's such a central part of myself. It's an important part, and it is, I think, different than how I am day to day. And I'd like to show that and like show it off in a sense, because like you have this skill and you're like, this is the thing that I'm super good at, and you're proud of yourself, right? And I think, yeah, people still will be like, wow, like I, you know, wasn't expecting that necessarily. But I don't know, maybe it's less and less because I do feel kind of more at ease within myself off stage. And it used to really be, when I started, that performing was a way to have some like confidence and express things that I didn't really feel like I could express in my day-to-day life. Like I felt quite insecure and kind of like small, you know, and then suddenly you're on stage and you can like yell and be big, and that's really exciting. And
the people will applaud you for it as well.
Yeah, and they'll like laugh at things as if you were funny. That's amazing. Or they'll cry because you cried.
Oh, it's all about the
like,
crying.
Whoa.
Like,
yeah.
If I can get someone to cry, then I've done my job here. And that thing of like,
yeah, man.
I will take that as a win. I literally, again, I'm just going to say not even times. I was at the Genesis Slam recently. I don't know when this is coming out. Recently. And I had one of the poets in there ask me, like, do I do any level of acting? And it's like, no, I don't. But I'm glad that performance was good enough to make you feel like I maybe could do some.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I guess then, like, obviously, like, especially because you were new to acting, like, you were learning stuff then, but like, how much of like the acting and that kind of stuff came from spoken word? Like, did that influence much of it, or was it all? Are they still separate enough things that they don't intertwine too much?
I think they, I think they definitely intertwine, but the kind of acting that we were taught to do, I went to Rose Bruford to the actor and performer training MA, and it's very physical. So I think a lot of the things that I feel the most comfortable with, like using my voice in a certain way. I also have maybe a smaller, like more quiet energy, which relates better to being on a microphone or like screen work rather than, you know, on a stage. You have to be quite like big and quite strong. And I have trouble to access that kind of energy. I think I'm not necessarily a theater performer. Like it's just not what I have the most skills in, though I would love to do it more, but you know, it's not my biggest strength. So we were really pushed more in this theater direction. And I had to kind of like accept that I had a lot of limitations, essentially. So yeah, so it's not that it's totally separate, but it really pushed me, I think, beyond what I felt comfortable doing. And even just within, like, we did a Shakespeare, what's the right word? Term, like a term on Shakespeare, where we did the Winter's Tale. And our teacher split up the roles so that we each had sort of like something chunky, like something meaty to do. And I had one of the Hermione, like the lead female character roles, and we all of the three of us who were cast in her part all wanted to do each other's parts, but I think she cast us doing things that she thought that we could excel at, but they actually weren't the things that we felt the most comfortable doing. So that was really interesting. Like the really like intense emotional piece, I was like, oh, I think I could kill that. But instead I had something which was quite like light and sort of like flirtatious and jokey, and it was so hard for me to like access that kind of lightness because it's not what I'm used to doing in my poetry quite often. Yeah.
I vaguely know where I'm going with this, and I have I have bits of a question in my head that hopefully if I say it out loud will become an actual question. So much of acting is taking other people's work and saying it and playing that character, etc. Have you ever, how much have you experimented with or the idea of either you taking other people's poems and doing them, or other people taking your poems? And like, if with that, like so much of spoken word I think is presumptively assumed to be real and serious so much of the time. So like, I guess thoughts on that, and if that's something you'd consider doing, and what you think would come from stuff like that.
I would love to. And actually, when I was in school, I was thinking about this the other day, that it's such a shame that I didn't do it at the time, because I think it would be too late sort of now. My classmates were all like really into the, you know, like they all came to my book launch and they were super supportive about it. And I had this idea that we
Getting
should...
them all to do your poems.
Yeah, like we should put on a show. But not just that they come on and do the poem as a poet, but that they interpret it like through dance, through movement, voice, with music, like as a piece, you know. And I loved that idea. Like obviously it's quite, you know, self-serving as well, like to get loads of people to do your work for you.
Everyone come here, learn, and like your new script is my book.
Exactly.
We're gonna learn that line for line.
We're gonna put on a one night only event.
Unpaid,
you know? Obviously, I don't have money for that, you know. But yeah, I really kind of regret that, because I think that would have been such a cool experience. And I've collaborated before, like with a dancer, I think just one time, and that was amazing. Like seeing, because before that, like I had no dance experience at the time. So watching someone coming from such a different art form work with your stuff. Also I've collaborated with bands before where they turn some poems into music. And I think it's beautiful. I think it's so powerful. And it's like, I find it really, really moving. So yeah, I would love to. I doubt that you remember much about this, but you recorded our movement pieces actually. And there was a long improv kind of piece that we did that we used two of my poems as the basis. This was part of the master's program as well. And it was my movement teacher's idea, because she knew I was a poet. And I think it's still like a super nice thing that she was like, Demi, let's involve some of your work, you know. And I felt so proud that I got to, again, use this skill that kind of didn't really have that much to do with what we were doing at the time, or like I was kind of putting my work as a poet, you know, outside the door while I was there as an actor. But yeah, so I came in one day and read these two poems to my classmates, and then we used that as like the basis to interpret some movement together. And it was also amazing. Like I found it really powerful. So I would love to do more. And I think, yeah, trading poems, like I know people like to do this. Well, I think it's so cool. I think that's awesome. Yeah.
Perfect. And like, there was probably a better order to ask some of these questions. I will.
That's okay.
Figure out my. I'm a good host. I can do all of the hosting stuff properly. But like, you were talking about the fact that like your acting seems to work well for like on screen stuff, and that seems to be your like biggest strength in that. So like, obviously, we're starting to get a world where there are more poetry films and poetry media things being made. So like, would that, the idea of acting in a poetry film and that kind of stuff, like I know you've made a couple of like small little poetry films, like is there a want to do more of that, play around it a bit more and see where that can go? Yeah,
so my TV idea actually revolves around spoken word to some extent, and it's very autobiographical. And part of me is like, okay, so my theory about it is we have loads of TV shows about people who are writers, stand-up comedians playing themselves, super common, you know, they're a dime a dozen, and other types of writers as well. We don't really have that with poetry. maybe there's a good reason for that.
That'd be a depressing show at the end of it.
You know, like, I think part of the problem is when you watch something like Marvelous Mrs. Maisel or like these shows that are so kind of joyful, TV is a lot about wish fulfillment, and you project yourself onto the character. And what is like addictive to watch to an extent is watching this person's like rise to fame, rise to glory, like watching the underdog get their chance at success that you know they deserve, because that's you. You deserve that chance as well. And you know, like, you have something special inside of you, and this character is like living out that fantasy for you. And I think poetry, unfortunately, there's not really that bar.
We don't have the success in poetry.
We don't. There's not like a framework for it. There's not a role model really for that in the mainstream. So I don't know if that really can work, honestly, as a concept. I would love to give it a try because I think the poetry world is really fascinating. I think it's a beautiful way to tell stories. And I've been in rooms where I'm like, whoa, you know, I can get a bit jaded because I've seen so much poetry, which I think is a normal thing. But I still, despite that, I've experienced things where I'm like, oh my God, I wasn't expecting to, be so moved by something. And it's incredible. It's incredible to sit in this kind of intimate live environment and feel that from someone, and feel like, my favorite thing is someone sharing something personal anyway. And yeah, I was thinking about that a lot actually at the process night where I featured and Sarah McCready featured. Watching her set, I was like, so moved by it, and just thinking, I don't know, there is something really special about this, and why isn't it kind of more on the radar of the mainstream? It really ought to be, like, it could be. And I don't know. So anyway, I'm not sure that I'm the person that will like achieve that, but I've had lots of thoughts about it, and I would be happy to try. Even when I was in school, Kip had an idea to like try to turn the class into some kind of show, because we watched a lot of like Def Jam and stuff, you know, as references. And it's been so many years since Def Jam was a thing, but like, it was popular. It did well. Kanye West went on there, you know, come on. Like, it wasn't like, it was kind of a phenomenon. So yeah.
I guess with something like that, you almost look at some of the things like your Britain's Got Talent, America's Got Talent, etc., and those kind of shows, which seems to be slowly accepting more poets, etc. Like, I know, obviously, like, I think it was over lockdown. I'm going to be bad, and I would have forgotten his name, but there was a poet that went and won America's Got Talent, whose name I have managed to completely forget, but you have had spoken word go on there and win it, but like, that didn't seem to change much
the perception about it.
But it is seemingly a thing. Like, I guess with that then, and with the whole acting side of things as well, like, if these shows came about, like, how much of it do you think would again be like, if especially when producers get involved in it, how much would you happen to also find the right character to follow, etc.? And I think that would that be a part of it, like,
yeah, sure. If you relate to someone, yeah, definitely. And that's where I think something where maybe you get the backstory of someone could be really exciting. Like, this concept of Kips was kind of like a reality show where you follow these students, and, you know, a lot of times, like, especially undergraduate students, they were kind of shy, they're kind of awkward, like me when I was starting as well. And you see them transform over the course of 10 weeks, which is incredible. That's such a short time to go from like, I've never spoken on stage before, to then like absolutely owning it and like getting a standing ovation or whatever. That is cool. That is relatable. That is like an underdog story. That's something that is compelling to see and really moving to see, whether or not you give a shit about poetry or like have ever wanted to read it. So yeah, I think that could be a big thing. My idea also for my show, it's like essentially my story about being in Berlin, coming to Berlin, and being this like kind of foreigner. My family's German, but I don't have family in Berlin. And being quite at odds with the system in general. I think that's probably more the thing that people can relate to. And someone who is very much like I was at that time 5 years ago, kind of shy and like coming of age as a young woman, and then finding her voice, like it is a powerful thing to watch someone find themselves and find this way to express themselves and to say, hey, you might think that this is all that I'm capable of, but actually I can do so much more. There's so much more inside of me. And yeah, as a teacher, that's what I'm so excited about when I see students access that too. So I think it would be compelling for sure.
So like in your TV show, you were hoping that you could properly land the likable main character role.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, I'm full of illusions of grandeur, but I am joy, I am abundance, I am wealth.
We're manifesting, we're all manifesting.
The show is happening. Yeah. So anyway, yeah.
But, like my cynical mind sees I feel there's a world where you get the quirky poet friend first and that kind of thing, and that gets you into maybe poetry's this fun thing because you'll always have not quite the same level, but Phoebe and Friends doing her music stuff, etc.
Right.
Like there was a world where you do Friends again now and Phoebe's a poet.
Sure, yeah, but then Phoebe is often the punchline, and as we know,
I mean, to be fair, poets should be punchlines a lot of the time.
Yeah, and it is often, but at the same time, there is poetry, read or spoken or whatever, that is really moving to people. Like poetry, I'll kind of repeat, I think maybe Jimmy Bowman has said this, or he always asks people on his podcast, why do you think there's been such a resurgence in, poetry sales, for example, in the UK, have been quite good in the last years. And people often say, or he said, yeah, poetry is this thing, we use it at funerals, we use it at weddings, we use it to mark these incredible occasions. There is something to that, to someone who's able to describe the human experience and to distill it in this form. It makes an impact. So yes, it's funny and it can be cringy and it can be all that, and we can laugh at ourselves a lot as we do, as the anti-slam is about and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think it should be honored a bit more. And there are different cultures and societies, I think, in which it is honored differently still. Well,
it's spoiling the quickfire questions from earlier, the whole, time, weird thing. With one of the questions being, do you think poetry will ever be mainstream? I put it in there as a fun question to ask, but also there was a balance of it already is mainstream, but it's not. Poetry is a thing that we are taught in school from a young age. It is, like we said, at weddings, funerals, it's in and used in so many things. Off camera, we were talking about it being used in TV shows and adverts, etc. Poetry is around. I think the asterisk beside that is, especially with us and the world that we're in, is spoken word going to be mainstream.
Yeah, which is its own thing. And I was telling you, I was hanging out with a poet last night who I don't know super well, but he's more a page poet. And it was just really interesting because we were kind of going through lists of people that we know. We're both in London and we know completely different circles of people just because of that. The publishing is different, the kinds of awards that you might be up for, the different markers of success, and the circles, the scenes are separate, to some degree. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think spoken word, like I said in my rapid fire response, I think it's quite connected to comedy and to music and hip hop and all of that kind of stuff. And I think, those things have found success. Look at Beyonce, Lemonade, but yeah, it's just I think the problem to a degree is there's only one Lemonade every 10 years. There's one Amanda Gorman performing at the inauguration, and then everybody goes, oh, after Amanda Gorman performed, it's one of my favorite stories. So many people wrote to me and were like, did you watch this poet on the inauguration? And I was like, yeah. I mean, she's amazing. So it's nothing against Amanda Gorman. I think she's really incredible. And
Amanda, if you're watching, we love you.
We love you. Come on the show. Come to London. But I think, and she did a great job for that gig, But I was so annoyed because it's like being a painter and someone goes to an exhibition and they're like, oh, I saw this Van Gogh guy. is that what you do? It's like, no, like there's so many shades of poetry. It's just as vast and complex and different and multifaceted. There's people with so many different styles of work and so many different topics that they do, and so many different scenes and histories and whatever. So the thing that can be troubling about one person then representing poetry is like, then it just flatlines everything. Like, oh, all poetry must be like that. So we need more. I got really mad because at the time that Amanda Gorman had her inauguration poem, I was working for this company in a communications role, and my boss basically said something like, oh, we should look into getting Amanda Gorman to like write something for us, or like working with her. It was just like the day after the inauguration aired, and like jumping on this bandwagon. And meanwhile, I had been in this job for like 4 months saying, oh, I know all of these amazing poets, we could involve them. And like I had come up with all these ideas for campaigns involving poets, and like fallen on deaf ears until but we should get Amanda Gorman. And I was like, that's so reductive. And also one of my coworkers very aptly was like, Amanda Gorman's not going to work for us. She has like a million better things to do, obviously. Like,
you never know.
Well, yeah, but
I mean, yeah, you know, but you never know.
I was like, fucking hell. And for the 10 grand, 20 grand, whatever, maybe you would pay someone at that level, you could actually pay like, you know, people who are kind of more coming up and hire like 10 people who actually really need it as well, like who could use that money and those opportunities. And that's what drives me crazy, is like there are so many good poets, and instead you just hear about the same people, like the same people get the big opportunities. And you know, it's great for them, you know, they've worked hard as well, but fucking hell, I read something also recently, someone was writing on Twitter, I forget who, but a poet who was kind of, just upset about how there are a lot of opportunities, development opportunities for people at the starts of their career or like under a certain age. And then there's nothing for like mid-level kind of career. Yeah, and that's sort of how I'm feeling.
Rick Dove was talking about that a lot, of things like what to do now, etc.
Yeah, and I'm feeling that way. Actually, she was talking about theater. I remember this Twitter thing, but I feel like the same in poetry, where I'm like, well, it's too late for me to, I don't know, be a young poet of whatever, the Barbican, South Bank Center, Roundhouse, etc. Like, it's too late. I wasn't here at the right time. So what now? Do I just kind of like fade away and like do something else?
Well, I guess the last question that vaguely ties into all of that is, have you saw what happened to the Forwards Prize recently?
Yes, yeah.
Do you think that would be the step in the right direction in terms of like the fact that Forwards Prize has now got a spoken word performance category?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I should talk about this.
Say it.
I just feel like some people who were on the short list have already had really amazing opportunities in their career and huge major awards, and it would be nice if they threw the spoken word community more of a bone with that prize, which is what I was hoping they would do, because Joelle Taylor judged it, and she wrote an incredible book, but she's also an incredible performer, amazing performer, and I think someone who really like would have the back of this scene, so to speak. But yeah, I just was surprised that it kind of ended up showcasing, well, I don't know if it's fair to say, because I haven't fully watched all of the videos either, but yeah, I guess I thought I would recognize more of the people on there, and I do know some, and I think like amazing, like great for them, but yeah, I thought it would be more like the spoken word prize, and instead it's like the best reading of, I don't know. Yeah, I was just really surprised by it, I guess. And I thought it would push further past the page thing into like performance poetry territory.
I guess it's almost akin, not akin to the Oscars, but like similar-ish vibe to the Oscars. Like when the whole Oscars So White thing was coming out, and they eventually not changed how they were doing, but like opened up the academy more to get more people in of different backgrounds and cultures. It's that thing of like, that was a good start, but then the changes we've seen so far have been minimal so far, and almost a level of, you almost want to go like, no, properly, now let's not pick, but like, let's do a full wholesale change. And it feels like this is a small opening, which is nice and appreciated. And obviously don't want to give anyone a token award, a token prize, but without taking away from the poets that are nominated for it, because they are all fantastic poets and writers and performers in their own right.
Yeah,
there's a little bit of like, and not to say that they shouldn't win it, but a level of like, cool, you've got this new award and it's going to people that in a lot of people's eyes could have won a lot of the other awards. Yeah,
or already have quite a big platform, whereas I think this is more my problem, is like, I don't think spoken word artists have as much of a platform. There aren't as many prizes out there for us. Like, it's not the same as, you know, when you publish, sure, like we publish collections as well. Do those collections usually like get shortlisted for stuff? Not as often. So like, it's seen in a different way, unfortunately, by some people maybe in this scene or in this industry. So yeah, I just would have loved for it to be maybe a little bit more of like a spoken word showcase. But I think the thing is, it is positive that category now at least exists. And maybe it's just like anything, the first year will have some bumpiness in terms of like, I wrote them a lot of questions actually because I also submitted, and I wasn't sure about some of the parameters. Like, is it more about video? Is it more about this? There was no like time length also for the video. And yeah, so you don't know. I think probably they will take feedback from the kinds of questions that people sent and maybe incorporate that into the future years, I'm guessing, you know. And like, as someone who applies for lots of different opportunities and awards and stuff, or funding schemes, I know that like some organizations do an amazing job being really thorough about the kind of information that they give to people who are applying, because they don't want to waste people's time. But I think that kind of awareness only comes after doing it for a while. Right?
Yeah, and again, it's that thing, is like, as much as there are criticisms, is that whole thing of, as well, you've got to try it once and then see what you're not going to get it perfect.
So my guess is that next year they're going to be like, okay, so we know from last time, like, we're going to do like a 3-minute limit to the poem. I mean, even, you know, or XYZ. Yeah.
So like, I mean, it's not even in a bad, it's not even a bad, but just a level of things like, biased Tyrone is very much, I want Bogdan to win that award. I love all the other playing there, but I want Bogdan to win it. Bogdan, like, poetry dad, poetry lovely person, all that stuff. So Polish. As much as I want him to win that award, there's also that thing of like, also love the Loud Poets, love all of them in their involvement in that, and I'm so happy that like, even tangentially, they're now in that forward.
Yeah, it made me really pleased that like a Loud Poet recording was, you know, picked.
There was also that and the not cynical, but the not questioning, but moment of pause was like, and wonderful book and piece with Jack King's music behind it, and it's like, so we could have spoken word and music. In my head, I'd already kind of eliminated music as a thing, and like, not that it should be eliminated or it doesn't count as spoken word, but the thing of, in my head, I heard spoken word award and spoken word performance. In my head, just.
Yeah, and I was like, should it be a poetry film? Because that's a completely different thing than like showing someone in a live performance setting.
And it's not to say that it should just be one certain thing, but a level of, again, it's when you realise that spoken word is a very broad thing and can mean a lot of things, and not that that's bad, but a level of...
I think also, like, it might, you know, discussing this to this degree, it might come across as like, well, they're just sore losers or whatever.
I mean, I didn't nominate myself for it, so I can't be a sore loser on that one.
I am. But, you know, but I think really what it comes from is like, everybody who's involved, like submitting to stuff like that, you just want an opportunity to show your best, because I had, you know, different pieces that I was considering, and it's hard to decide, because you're kind of trying to guess like, what will
I just want Jasmine Cardosi to win
interested everything. So anyway, I think the having like really clear parameters about what an organization is looking for in its judging and stuff is just super helpful, because then you can like if you only have one chance to submit something, from that year,
Must
you
not
want to.
make 8 Mile reference. Only got one shot. Must not go down that road. But I would choose to end the Let's Talk About there.
Yes.
We have talked about a lot of things there.
Yeah.
And now we're going to move seamlessly, onto our last section, which is my fun one, slow fire questions.
Great.
So, for slow fire questions, obviously quick fire questions exist. We did that today. The video might be out already or not out. Who knows? Time, weird, all that shit. But now we are doing slow fire questions where a lot of those questions, as vaguely previewed beforehand, are questions that I like but would want to expand on more. So we're going to go at these questions at random and properly answer them and see where that conversation takes us. As said off camera, not all these questions are serious. There just could be some really interesting things we expand on, but we'll see how it goes. So, Demi, please give me a number in between 1 and 100.
44.
Cool. In which case, then, because you gave a brilliant answer to this beforehand, we're going to go in depth with this one now, and you've kind of already talked about it a little bit. Would you watch a Netflix show about poetry?
Yes. And I would watch a Netflix show about myself.
I feel like we've already
Working in
covered.
poetry.
I feel like we've already covered what your Netflix show about
we
yourself
have talked
would
about
be.
it quite a lot, yeah.
But so that you are very much pro watching a Netflix show about poetry. Like, okay, on that then, like, would it have to be drama and slash? Wait.
I would want some story because, to be honest, I have very little attention span when people send me like recordings of poems. So I think I would need some story around it.
What about documentaries?
Yeah, that would be cool. I mean, I love like Slam Nation. I've watched it like a million times. So yeah.
Have you watched any other poetry documentaries?
Name some. What are some?
The main one I go back to is Louder Than a Bomb.
No, I haven't. I
That
don't
is
think
a
I've heard of it.
Very good one.
Cool.
Unsurprisingly, it follows the Slam, Louder Than a Bomb.
Okay.
American Slam, Team Slam. I believe it's high schools across the US.
Nice.
I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
know off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I don't know how American schools work. You know that better than I do.
High school.
But it follows like 4 different teams in Louder Than the Bomb.
Yeah.
From like the year leading up to it, the actual slam itself. I really enjoyed it. It was on
Nice.
Oprah Winfrey's film club thing she did. There was a YouTube video where she's endorsing it at the very least. Therefore, it's got Oprah's backing. So
Excellent. Love that.
I believe it's on the internet somewhere.
Okay.
I was about to say
I will
Apple
see.
iTunes. I don't actually know where it is, but people can find it.
Yeah, Slam Nation is kind of like that, but with the adult slam. So it was filmed the year that Bosia and Saul Williams were on the New York team.
Nice.
And it's like amazing. And you have some real American poetry OGs in that film, plus going into a bit like the history of the slam scene. Yeah.
Perfect. Oh yeah, give me another number, please.
11.
11. What is your brand?
She lived in Berlin. I guess like kind of like slightly okay. I'm a bit like I'm sort of foreign because I'm from the US, but I lived in Berlin. And when I lived in Berlin, but I was coming here for poetry stuff, I was always a bit like the quirky, I don't know, she's kind of from California, she's kind of Austrian girl. And I think that worked well, so I was a bit different, you know. Yeah, I feel like if you watch my Patreon video, that is a very good representation of my brand visually. And a lot of people commented afterwards, first of all, being surprised how well done the video was, but also just like, what the fuck? Like, why do you have all of this weird stuff in your house? Because all of the props and stuff were just like really beautifully color coordinated.
I still believe I have the share mug you gave me.
Excellent. Yeah, there you go. And like, yeah, there's like a cat phone and there's just a lot of, yeah.
I am surprised Gus did not come up in what your brand is.
Oh yeah, Gus is in that video as well though. So yeah, and then I have a cat and the cat is often featured in what I do. So there you go.
There.
Yeah.
Give me another number, please.
22.
Ooh. Do you have a nickname?
Yeah, well, okay. So some have called her Demi California. Also, yeah, sometimes people call me Dem, but like pretty rarely, I would say. Demi is already quite short, so yeah.
I was gonna go on some level of like Demi's a short enough name that
Exactly,
you don't see a nickname, but like, has there been like nicknames, anything like? Have you done anything that's
Like
earned you a new
anything-
nickname?
Ooh. I don't think so, honestly. Yeah, I think those are really it. Yeah. No.
Fair play.
Oh, well,
Oh.
my mom does sometimes call me Demi Line, which is like a very cute kind of German thing. You add line to something. It's like small, sort of, yeah, Demi Line. And I would call her Mutti Line.
There.
Yeah.
Another number between 1 and 100, please.
60.
What is your dream job?
To be a writer.
What kind of writer are we saying?
I would love to just be able to write and make kind of whatever I want to do, I guess. Like, I don't really want to be a copywriter forever. I think like making TV, honestly, would be the dream. But generally, like, I studied visual art in my undergrad. I'd like to come back to doing more visual art as well as writing and performance. And I think so generally, maybe instead of writer, I should say an artist. Like I think artists in the contemporary world, in the modern world, work using whatever medium serves the idea that they want to express, you know? So yeah.
Artist more than content creator.
Yeah. Yeah. Ideally. It would be really nice to not have to worry about making content anymore.
Fair play.
I wouldn't mind.
Another number, please.
55.
Cool. I don't know how we're going to get a conversation out of this one. Favorite sports team?
Oh, yeah. No, I don't really have one. So I'm a big fan of Jilly Cooper. Do you know who Jilly Cooper is?
Nope.
Okay. Shame on you, being British. No, so Jilly Cooper is kind of like this... Oh, this is such a aside. So she is like a kind of romance writer who was very big in like the 80s and 90s. And she wrote this book called Riders, not writers, Riders, as in yeehaw, about the high-paced, intense world of professional show jumping in England. And it's hilarious. It's one of my favorite books. It's very of its time. There are really problematic things in all of her books, but it's very funny. And so I would say my favorite sports team is the England Olympics show jumping team of that book.
I mean, that's a valid answer. That's a fully valid answer.
My dream is to just like be, I don't know, I would love to be the new Jilly Cooper, I guess. Like ride horses and yeah, write about it.
Well, it's not quite a sports person overall then.
No, I like horseback riding. I do some yoga now and I love to dance, but I'm not, I don't really watch any sports.
That is fair.
More my job is to like wind up the friends of mine who are really into sports. So like, you know, I don't know. Oh, football is great, but like, why don't they kick it into the goal more often? That kind of stuff. Yeah. Perfect. People love that.
Let's do 3 more questions.
Okay.
Give me another number, please.
12.
12. What is your go-to karaoke song?
Oh my God, I was thinking about this today, Tyrone. So I'm about to go back to Berlin for a bit, and I think I want to set up a karaoke night, and I have not done this as karaoke yet, but I would love to sing this song by this German kind of reggae hip-hop band called Seed. It's Seeed. It's called Lass das Licht an, which means leave the light on, and it's a sexy song. It's about bumping, and I want to, I think it would be so fun to sing at karaoke in German, because it's like German rap, which is its whole own thing. It's its own planet of music, basically, that I'm quite a fan of.
Demi California, the German rapper.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be a good rap name, to be fair.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very like, I don't know. I just discovered, well, the funny thing about Seed is that I've done this only twice, but basically, like, you know, on Tinder, you can put like a song as your anthem. So some years ago, I was in Austria and I was really bored. I was like, I'm gonna make a playlist of all of the anthems of the profiles that I swiped. So I swiped for about like an hour and just added every single song to a playlist, and I called it Tinder Boys Like brackets Austria. And then I did it once in Berlin. But I spent quite a while listening to all that music, and the Seed I discovered through one of those playlists. A different song is called Lusty Gain, which means let her go, which is a great breakup song. And I just became like obsessed with it. And I would listen to it before slams and stuff to like get myself amped up basically to perform. And I don't know, I just like entered what you could call like my German rap era. And I listened to that album all the time.
The personal question, did you go on the date with the Seed boy?
No. Don't know who it was. I was just like, nah.
Just did your song and that's all I got from you.
Yeah.
Fair.
Mm-hmm.
2 more.
16.
16 years. Favorite book?
Oh, it's so hard. I have too many books to name like a favorite, you know, whatever. But I will say one that comes to mind that I think about a lot is The Years by Annie Ernaux. And she won the Nobel Prize for Literature last year. She's an amazing French writer. And The Years has been translated to lots of different languages, so I read it in English, of course. But I just love her writing in general, and I think it's a really, really powerful memoir, but it's written as we did this happened to us. So it's like a collective view on the period of French history that she lived through, essentially. It's very interesting and very moving.
Very beautiful.
Yeah.
And now, last question.
Mm-hmm. Oh. Is there a question that you've never gotten to ask that you're like, I wish someone would choose this?
I have asked every question in a quick fire at some stage. I haven't asked them all in a slow fire yet.
All right, then let's say 99.
Describe yourself in 3 words.
Thoughtful. Spicy. And strange.
And that is the note we will end the podcast on. No, thank you very much for joining me on this podcast.
Thank you, Tyrone. It's been a blast.
Thank you. If you want to be found online, you have a camera there. You can tell people where to find you and all that.
I'm quite easy to find online. I can be found at demianter.com. My Patreon, if you would like to be a part of it, is patreon.com/demianter. I'm also on Instagram at anterdemi. And just to make it that much more confusing, on Twitter as @demianter.
Perfect. I have been your host, Tyrone Lewis. There'll be links in all of the things to find us, support us, do the things. There's the Twitter, there's the Instagram, there's the Patreon, there's the Facebook, there's the YouTube. There's probably going to be a Threads by the time this comes out, if Threads is still a thing. Also, that's assuming that Twitter is still a thing. I don't know. I don't do outros properly. I have not planned an outro properly. So this is just rambling on until the camera stops or I choose to end the edit now. This is the Process Podcast. It's the thing that we do. Yay. Bye.